order. I'll repeat it again for the recording. Since it's 4:30, I'll call this the committee of the Community Resources and Tourism Committee to order. It looks like we have everybody both in attendance either physically or virtually, and glad that Anne could join us on her vacation or wherever she happens to be. She was worried about potential internet access. So to kind of get started, we'll do an approval of the minutes. Is there a motion? Second. Any changes, any corrections to the minutes? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And it passes. Do we have any public comments? Okay, we will move on from that, and we will move on to our staff report from our extension educator, would be you. And do you have a little presentation for us today? And make sure she's set up with a microphone too, so that Anne can hear her.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Thank you for letting me come here and talk with you today. I have just a few horticulture updates. Again, my name is Margaret Murphy. I'm the horticulture educator serving Chippewa, Dunn, in Eau Claire counties. And I'll figure this out. Yay! Wait a minute. So UW-Madison Extension, our horticulture program, and some of you probably already have heard this a few times from me, but we focus on several environmental issues that Wisconsin is facing right now, one being pollinator decline, which is a problem that's being faced throughout the world. And of course, climate change, which is a big concept. So we're looking at ways we can address it with proper plant selection and plant placement. Basically, the right plant in the right place, especially around the home, can help you reduce some of your energy needs. And then also environmental pollution is a big one that we're looking at, which is basically, we really have been thinking a lot about a strategy called plant healthcare, PHC for short, that's kind of taking a more holistic approach to your plants and really making sure, again, that you're putting the right plant in the right place, that you understand your site requirements, what's in your site before you plant. Because basically a plant that's in the right place isn't just going to survive, it's going to thrive. And if you have a thriving plant, it's so much more resilient to any kind of stresses, environmental stresses, within reason, and also to insect attack, diseases, things like that. And so if you have a healthy plant, you're going to be hopefully looking at not needing to use pesticides or not as much, or even as much fertilizer. So if you put the correct plant selection for the right place, that goes a long way to helping reduce those types of inputs. The other thing, of course, we've been addressing for a long time is called integrated plant IPM, integrated plant management, which is basically pest management techniques that, again, help you think about a strategy, several different strategies of how you can go about addressing any plant issues you do have in your yard or garden. And again, using a combination of them, some you can do culturally, some you can do mechanically, and some you do chemically, or sometimes you do a combination of such. But the idea, again, is to get people thinking to not automatically go for that spray sitting on the shelf in their garage, to think first about whether it's really needed. Think about what your tolerance level is for any kind of issue you have in your garden. And again, it all goes toward trying to reduce that likelihood of environmental pollution that can be contributed to by the overuse of horticulture chemicals in yard and garden settings. And so we believe horticulture best practices, is what we preach, can really play an important role in helping to work on some of those issues. Great. So in my job, serving the 3 counties that I do, I work a lot to support the adoption of environmentally sound horticulture practices. That's kind of what I preach when I reach out to people directly or when we work through our local master gardeners. So one thing we're doing right now, which the registration is about to close on this April 15th, and this is our big horticulture class that we offer every year now. It's an online course, and it's taken the place of our, what we used to call a level 1 training for master gardeners or for people who wanted to become master gardeners. This is now a class called Growing and Caring for Plants in Wisconsin, Foundations in Gardening, and it covers all the key concepts for selected growing and maintaining plants here in Wisconsin, utilizes that integrated pest management and plant health care frameworks. It's open to everyone, so it's not just for folks who are interested in becoming master gardeners, but for those people who are interested in joining our Wisconsin Master Gardener program, this is an approved learning opportunity for them. So this is what Extension offers as one level of training folks to become master gardeners. And I'm gonna, like I did last year, we do offer optional labs during this course, which are more interactive. They're still done virtually, but as interactive as you can get virtually. And so I will again be a lab instructor for that this year. But this has been a very successful class. It's actually pretty much filled up for the year already, but we still have a few slots open. One thing we really focus on too, and master gardeners focus a lot on this too, is pollinator health, because pollinators are in dire straits throughout the world. The monarch has just been listed as endangered on the IUCN list, the red list, which is an international list at looking at global populations of all sorts of species. And so in June, there was National Pollinator Week. So we kind of use that as our kickoff time to raise awareness on pollinators and to provide the public with information on how to create pollinator-friendly habitats in their own yard. A lot of people think, well, I live in an apartment, I have a small space, I can't really do much. Well, you can. I was just spending a week out at Beaver Creek last week, and in front of their nature center, they have little pockets of these beautiful native gardens. And one of the participants of a master naturalist class that I was part of did an inventory of all the critters, both plant and animal species out there. And the biodiversity out there was just amazing. They had hundreds of different creatures out there utilizing that space. And it's just a few gardens, kind of all not even connected, just kind of in places. So even putting in just a few little islands can go a long way to helping our insect population. What I learned when I was in graduate school with ecology is that, the earth needs plants and the earth needs insects. And once you got those two things, it builds from there. So that's where we start. And so if you can just start putting in a few things here and there, I have some potted plants in my patio because I live in an apartment, and I have had pollinators there just with a few flowers, tomatoes, things like that, bumblebees. Crazy like that. I've been having a lot of pollinators coming in throughout the summer, and that's a place that's pretty barren because they don't have any trees near my apartment complex, which, speaking about climate change, without those shade trees, I'm dying in my upstairs apartment during the summer months. So I'm using a lot more energy to keep that area cool because I don't have those lovely shade trees. But even with a place that's pretty barren and has just a treated lawn basically in the backyard, I can still build a little mini habitat. And what we did to help kind of kick off the promotion to pollinators is that I hosted a pollinator garden tour at Lake Wissota State Park. We held a pollinator night at Menominee Community Garden. They actually have a section there that's dedicated as a monarch way station. Altoona Public Library did a great thing. For the whole week, they dedicated a section in their library just to pollinators. And they had books and they had extension publications, but they had games, they had seeds, they had activity sheets for the kids. It was a really nice setup that they did. And I'm also currently working with staff and volunteers at Lake Wissota State Park they got grant funding to put in a rain garden using native plants. So we'll be starting to plant that probably in September. So if anyone's interested, or if you know of anyone who would like to get involved, we need hands to help us get all those plants in. We also do a radio show called Gardening in the Valley. I think I've mentioned this before. This was something we started back in February. I did it with two master gardeners, Dave Weaver and Andy Heron. Dave Weaver works for already has a radio show at this station, WHYS. And so he was interested in doing something on gardening. And so we decided, well, yeah, let's see if we can drum up some interest in this. So the first Saturday of every month, we have a garden show where master gardeners go on and discuss a timely topic. So it's another way to kind of get the word out on good horticultural practices and things like that. This month, of course, we had a master gardener focus on pollinators and native plants. A lot of them are in bloom right now. It's also a good time in the next month or so if you want to save seeds from your natives. In September, we'll have a master gardener who's going to be discussing planting fall bulbs, which we can't believe, but we're getting into that fall season pretty soon where you will be doing that. Another thing I've been working on a lot this summer is we have a 6-week youth gardening program. And this is a type of program, it's a really nice partnership between the horticulture staff, master gardeners, and Foodwise and the Boys and Girls Club. And it's been a very successful program running in Eau Claire for many years at a city park. They have a garden there, and I was just out there this morning and yesterday morning, and it's doing really well. And the kids from Boys and Girls Club come out and learn a little bit about the garden, and then they go and work with the Foodwise educators to learn about food and nutrition. So we wanted to see if we could set that up in other counties that I serve. So last year we started it in Chippewa. We have a plot at the community garden there in Chippewa Falls. And so we've been doing that. This is our second year there. And then this year we started it in Menominee at River Heights. And it's been a great success. They have 6 raised beds back in the back of their school off a parking lot. So it's pretty hot back there, but surprisingly the plants do really well. Staff and kids are great at keeping up with watering it and so forth, because raised beds being shallow need to be watered more often. So this year we were going to do a salsa garden. So we started with peppers, tomatoes, and onions. But then when the kids started looking through the seed packets, we ended up, we want watermelon, we want muskmelon, we want carrots. So we now have cucumbers, carrots, herbs, flowers. So we have quite a bit growing back there. And what we learned about today, this summer, and tomorrow is our last day. It's a 6-week program, so tomorrow is going to be our last day of the actual class. The gardens will keep going through the season, and of course, hopefully I'll be able to come back and help them close their gardens out. But anytime they want any help with the garden, I'm happy to come out and help them with that. But they'll keep harvesting. But we discussed things about plant needs. What do plants need from nature? What do we help them out with? We explored the importance of soil, very important. We explored plant parts. Why do plants have flowers? Why do they have seeds and stems? What are they used for? We also spent a class being plant investigators. It's very important to know how your plants are doing, not only by watering and feeding them, but also if you have to, but also to keep an eye out to see if they're under attack by anything, any bugs or any diseases or anything. This garden has been around for a while, but it hasn't been consistently planted. So this year and then last year, they planted a few of the beds. So it's a relatively new garden in some ways. And usually in that case, you don't see a lot of insects or disease move in yet. It'll probably come in time, but usually when you have newer gardens, it hasn't found you yet. So our gardens were pretty clean this year. We also have a class on art and observation, because that's one of the most important skills too in a garden, is just good observation to see if your plants are doing okay. Because if you have an issue, the sooner you can nip it in the bud, the better off you're going to be in saving your crop or thwarting the problem without having to do a lot of intervention. And so to practice good observation skills, I have them go through the garden and see what they can see, and then take what they've observed and what's inspired them. And then we go into their art room, and we let them do some art and they can draw what's inspired them. And then tomorrow, what we're going to focus on is exploring pollinators. And another thing we're working on is, of course, food security. It's another thing, teaching kids how to food garden is great, or just gardening in general, but food gardening is a wonderful thing to help your communities with food security. And of course, we have the Dunn County Jail, which Master Gardeners have been working on for many years now. And they have been doing a gangbuster season of growing great produce that they've been donating. And another thing we talked about with Stepping Stones, the food pantry in town, is they're interested. They reached out to us through FoodWise and through the horticulture program to see if we could reach out to master gardeners or community garden participants or just gardeners in general to see if they'd like to participate in a grow row program. This is a program that's been around for a while, and you grow a row in your garden that you're going to just dedicate toward donating to all that produce to a food pantry. But in this particular case, Stepping Stones wanted us to grow foods that are more specific or had been more in request from families, Hmong families and Hispanic families that are coming into the food pantry. So maybe growing a row for donation, but maybe planting some of these produce items that, again, would be used more or have been requested more by Hmong and Hispanic families. And so a few things like bok choy, tomatillas, and lemongrass, bitter melon, which I don't think is up there, but that was another one that was often asked for, and things like that. So we kind of got a late start on that this year, so we didn't get much going in that regard. But next year, we hope to get a good start on advertising this early on in this season. And then, of course, when I was at the wellness evening at the high school a couple of months back, I had an opportunity to talk with their United Way representative, who also had a booth there that night. And she told me that they're going to have to move out of the building they're currently in, and the building they're looking at moving into has some property around it. So they want to build some community gardens, and not necessarily the type that will be rented by individuals. They may do a few of those, but ones that could help the community come in and just either learn to garden and or help themselves to produce. So I'm very excited about working with them on that if they're able to get the property they're hoping to get. So moving forward, now that we're kind of coming to an end of our youth gardening programs, and I'm still busy with horticulture questions coming in, but as I go forward, it's now a time for me to start planning for the future. Some of the topics that have come across my desk that people want more outreach on is just soil health, soil testing. So I'll be doing some stuff on that. Pruning is always big. That's something we'll be doing more in the late winter, early spring, when most things are going to be pruned. Sustainable plantings and sustainable lawn care, or lower maintenance lawn care, are things that people are very interested in. So I'm going to be putting together some outreach on that. Climate change, what can we do on an individual local level to work on that? Pollinators, of course, invasives, ID, and removal are always stuff we're working on, because we're always getting asked plant ID questions and things like that. So if you have any particular topics that you're interested in, or you know a group that's interested in it, or you think we should be addressing more here in Dunn County, please let me know. Just give me a call, shoot me an email, and we'll start. This is the time of year that I want to be starting my planning for next year. And lastly, just to mention some of the horticulture questions that have been coming in the last couple of months. As usual, they're just all over the board. I didn't have too many on snakes, thankfully, but that one, someone sent me that picture and said that snake is living in our garden shed. And I'm not a big snake expert, but I think it's an eastern fox snake. But I sent them to the DNR just for confirmation. But I tell you, if that thing was living in my garden shed, I'd move. That's a huge snake. But I've been having questions on it. This is the time of year too. We're going to get into more fruit questions with apple trees and things like that. That poor little apple tree that I have a picture of had both rust and scab, which are two big fungal diseases. The other tree there, does anyone know what that is? We see that a lot in the spring and again in the fall. The little critter that comes by that causes that is it kind of comes in at those two times a year, really. That's the yellow belly sapsucker. And they like to drill into trees, and they don't go for insects. They're going for the sap. Fortunately, they don't usually drill too deep to really cause harm to the tree. But again, if they have a favorite tree, and a lot of times apples and crab apples are favorite trees, they can maybe start to weaken the tree, because anytime you have an opening in the tree, it can invite insects or disease in. So we talk with people about ways to help prevent that, or just let them know what that is. So those are some of the questions that are coming in. But again, we always get questions, or I always get questions, I should say, that kind of run the gamut. So I always kind of consider myself a jack of all trades, master of none, because I have to know a little bit about everything, or I learn it. Anyway, so that's kind of what we're doing right now, or I'm doing right now. I say we because I like to partner with master gardeners and FoodWise and other educators. And but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer anything you have.
Thank you, Margaret. I have a question, and it's probably a dumb one, but how would you define, what is a master gardener? I mean, how do they get that designation to be classified as a master gardener?
That's not a dumb question. That's a good question. Our model for the Master Gardener program has changed just this last January. So basically, to become a Master Gardener, you go through a basic education course, and it's a foundation course. But it's very broad. It covers everything from basic botany all the way through landscaping. So you cover an immense amount of topics in your training. The training lasts about, or in this particular case, the horticulture class you would take lasts about 12 weeks. And so it's a pretty substantial training that you go through. And then if you, and that again is open to the public, so anyone can take that foundational course. And then if you're interested in becoming a master gardener, you then will go on to what's called an onboarding course. Now that course doesn't have anything to do with training about or teaching you about horticulture, but basically teaches you the policies and procedures of what it means to be a master gardener volunteer. And once you finish your onboarding course, which I think most people take about 10 to 15 hours to complete that course, then you're considered, and you have a test at the end of that course. You have a 100-question test, I believe it is. You have to get 70% or better to pass it. You get to try it as often as you like. But once you successfully complete onboarding, then you're considered a certified master gardener. To maintain your certification, you have to complete 24 hours of volunteer service time every year, along with another 10 hours of continuing ed. So we do offer advanced trainings for master gardeners, and there's all sorts of different opportunities for them to get their continuing education. And so as long as they keep those hours in, those requirements, then you maintain your certification. What's changed about our program is that when folks became master gardeners, they were automatically considered extension volunteers. Now they're not considered extension volunteers automatically. Extension is still the organization that does the training, or offers the education to become a master gardener. And we also oversee the certification of master gardeners and their status. But when master gardener volunteers now go out into the community to do their volunteer work, as they have always done, they will now be the volunteer of that organization they're working with. So if you are doing a project with the school, working on a school garden, instead of being an extension volunteer, while you're doing that, you are considered a school volunteer. But you would still report those hours as long as you're volunteering with an organization that's approved by extension and you're doing the type of work that is considered appropriate for master gardeners to do. You can report those hours towards your volunteer service time or your continuing education time. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's you've talked about master gardener and this designation. I thought, well, is Larry a master gardener? I mean, he kind of knows his thing, but but I see there's some certification involved, and then also the volunteering
Yeah.
aspect of is a big part of it too.
Yeah, and that's actually the mainstay of how the program developed, was to get volunteer assistance out into your communities, working on horticultural projects. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for Margaret? Supervisor Bjork?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got 3 questions, and not questions, it's kind of following through what you've talked about today. And the first one is the elementary raised beds, gardens. And I guess I'm always a little concerned that kids get the idea that you just put a seed in the ground and then you come back later and get a watermelon. And I mean, I don't know to what extent the master gardeners have it, but I would think children ought to know something about soil types, what your garden with just pure sand produces, and next to one that has more organic matter in it, and why the organic matter is important. I have a livestock farm with 60 beef cows, and it always takes me weeks and weeks later, sometimes than my neighbors, to get my corn planted, because I am hauling cow manure and I am applying cow manure on the fields. Well, this year that cow manure gives me a corn crop where, if it didn't have the organic matter of that corn of that cow manure in those cornfields, they'd have been curled up like a lot of other ones. You can't, you can do a lot, but just the basics of what makes a good soil for producing a plant. And then number 2, pollinators. A couple of things here. My wife and I happened to be to a border collie trial out in Virginia a year ago, and we went to this little town, and just looking around in the junk shops, and guy had this tremendous garden out behind this the old 200-year-old building. And he was a fellow, and I think he came from Iowa, as you have, that identified monarchs. I mean, he helped me put a number on a monarch and how you hold it, and that number, and then away it goes. And he was in a flyaway of some sorts, and was saying how that then that number, or that monarch, will end up down wherever it is, and the little kids go out and find them, and they get a nickel for bringing back every one with a number. And so when I keep hearing about monarchs and their becoming whatever it is, I'd sure like little numbers on it, and that the numbers of monarchs that have traveled 10 years ago versus now, and that. So, and this guy had a beautiful backyard with all this stuff, and he actually had a hammock, and he laid down, and he says they'll drop right out of the sky, and I watched it happen, and it was amazing. Okay, monarchs, and milkweed. In the past, I've been told, or I have heard, that people have collected the worm, the yellow one, and then and that's not encouraged anymore, whether it is or whether it's not. I don't know. I mean, I can't see any need for milkweed other than that worm really likes it, and so milkweed stays in my stuff. So.
Yeah, it depends on who you talk to. There's Ursa Society, which is out west, and they're very well known for all their insect work. They aren't in favor of people collecting larvae or eggs and bringing them in and raising them in captivity and then releasing them. I think my understanding is, and I'm no expert on this, unfortunately, but is that it kind of depends on how you do it. Some people do it better than others as to how these animals, or how you raise them. And if you're doing, I think one thing that I learned when I was out at the Beaver Creek Master Naturalist course was that what's frowned upon is these huge companies that sell them over the internet kind of thing, because and I don't really know how that works, but they have so many of them that you don't know, where it's harder to keep track of how well they're being raised. And I don't know what the mortality rate is. So I probably am speaking out of turn here. I know in Beaver Creek, they do raise monarchs indoors. They go out and find the eggs and bring them in, and they only do like 6 or so at a time. So they're doing very low numbers and making sure everything stays clean and healthy in the environment they're being raised in. So it really, I've heard the same thing, that it's frowned upon, but I think it depends on who you talk to and who's actually doing it and how well they're doing it,
Right.
kind of thing. Yeah. And I liked your comment about soil too. You're absolutely right. And we do in our soil class talk a little bit about soil texture and how that relates to the right plant for the right soil. We need to do more with composting and organic matter, but sometimes I'm still working on how best to explain organic matter and get second and third graders to understand that. But
Well, I would think leaves and how they decompose
yeah,
and how leaves added to, a sandy soil mixture how it would change over the years.
Yeah.
Something simple like that.
yeah. And if we can start a compost maybe in the beginning of the summer and see it work its way through, that would be, I think, help them with a visual on how that works. Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think, it's kids got to know not only where their food comes from, but it doesn't just happen automatically. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to produce the food that this country needs. And big ain't great, big ain't bad, big is big and small is small. So everybody has a role in it. And then the last thing, going to be a treat for you. This is my present for you today.
Okay.
When you leave here today, you're going to head back towards Eau Claire, right? Or
Chippewa Falls. Yeah.
Chippewa Falls. Okay. When you leave the where we're at, the government center, the first road to the north goes up to the jail. Okay, got that? The second road goes up to some businesses, and one of those businesses, and the third road goes to 94. So the second road leads up to the Dunn County Electric Co-op, and their CEO manager, Jesse Singerhouse, is a go-getting young guy, come up through the 4-H program and local and just tremendous person. I don't know where they got it, but they have a flower natural site part of their landscape for their building. And you ought to stop and take a look at it.
Oh, I will. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you get a chance to give them a kudos someday down the road, do that, because it's always doubly important to me where you see private industry or business or this co-op, step forward and do what you're doing, through programming, getting a grant to do this.
Mhm.
They just spent their own money and did it.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I'm going to go
Yeah.
take a look
Well,
at that. Thank you.
enough out of me.
I'll
So,
have to
Thank
check
you.
that out on my drive home.
yeah.
Anybody else have any questions for Margaret? If not, you're excused. Thank you. Move on to the report from the area extension director. I see Jason isn't here. Did he submit something to you, Michelle? And
No, we just have what he reported in our monthly highlights.
okay,
So if there's any questions on that, I can try to expand on them.
okay. Anybody have any questions about some of what he reported in the highlights for this month? If not, was that also kind of just the extension budget? I see is on here too. Is that
Yep, I
just what
can,
he's reported, or do you have anything beyond that too?
I was just gonna bring up the budget and just kind of share the overview. So it's fresh in your mind before this Saturday's meeting.
Oh, that's right. You and I talked about this.
Yep. Because I will be at the meeting this Saturday for any questions that come up. So let me just share this here.
And Monica hasn't done this yet, and it's so exciting to have a 3-hour budget workshop on a Saturday morning.
Oh, I think we're hoping for just 5, right?
Oh, yeah, last year, wasn't it 5?
Um,
Exactly it. Exactly.
Extensions budget is pretty darn simple. So we did follow the guidelines this year of a 0% operating increase. So our budget is looking to go up about $7,000, which would be my salary and fringe as well as the educator contract. So that's, just 7,000 on our 200 and takes up to 250 for tax levy, 251. So on the top there, the revenue, we have a grant that we do get we get a postage allotment from Extension. So that's at 1957. And then we do have 2 separate cost centers for agriculture and youth and families. And those are just revenue that is generated for the programming, which goes right back out to the programming. So we just keep them in separate cost centers to keep things cleaner. So for the expenses down here, all of the white lines were things that they told me I need to budget. So that is my pay, that is IT. So then, the yellow lines are where some money was moved around, just for different needs for this coming year. But the yellow lines outside of the contractual services do equal out to what they were last year. So, is there any questions on those?
Any questions from anybody? No. Guess if we think of any, we can also talk about it on Saturday too, so.
And I will just add one more thing that is not on our budget currently, but might make round 2. So we do have a potential grant opportunity where the UW-Madison College of Ag Life Science, CALS, has a program, a grant-funded program that they're working on curriculum. And they're looking to maybe buy out half of my time. So they would then pay half my salary and fringe, which we would then use to fill with a half-time person. A lot of talks is still in the works. So if that is something that happens, it would be levy neutral. But we've got to just get all the ducks in a row to see if that will make the round 2 budget.
Scary. Dividing half your time. We don't want to lose you, so.
I will still be here every month with you guys. So I got to cover the important parts.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's move on to item 6, which is the website update. Dave, who's been working on the website, still hasn't gotten a huge amount of submissions. So what he's implemented is he's got some people that are helping him basically just gather information through publicly available sources and inputting stuff enough to get the site where it can eventually just be launched. And then once it's out there and once that information and people see it, there's going to be a lot more submissions because it's there. So that's the update with the site itself. Moving on to item 7A, which is talking about economic development. And I'm figuring this will be a little bit more of a freewheeling conversation about this to some degree. I don't know if it's out of line as far as rules to invite our new county manager to maybe participate with our discussion, because I know you have some opinion on economic development. So I'd like to get kind of some of your thoughts and feedback, if you would like to even join us up here, because otherwise Ann can't hear you if you're sitting back there. Last month we had voted to table the funding request for the Dunn County Economic Development Corporation. At the same time, the committee voted to basically fund economic development at the same, for the same amount that Dunn County EDC was requesting. And with the idea that we really didn't feel comfortable funding Dunn County EDC at just kind of a blanket fund that's like, here's your money, without having some not strings attached, well, maybe is what you might want to call it, but having some specific goals and objectives that they could set forth, as opposed to here's just your funding. I actually had a meeting yesterday with Gary Steen, who he's on the committee. I don't know if he's president of. He's not president, but he's very very committed to the Dunn County EDC. And so we had a discussion about things. What he would like to do is have a meeting with as many of the people on this committee who would like to attend, and with the stakeholders at Dunn County Economic Development, and basically see if there is a way forward, if we need to set some parameters. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about here, we kind of last month decided that we wanted to fund economic development up to $55,000. That was the amount that they had requested. The thought would be that they could come up with some kind of program or plan for that, and potentially they could be, fully funded or not. If we as a group decided that, our committee decided we had some parameters that we wanted Dunn County EDC to meet or whatever, what would some of those be? And I want to kind of open this up to a discussion as to some of our thoughts. So like if we were to have this meeting, if we thought it was valuable, because one of the things I kind of said to Gary was, I don't see any point in meeting if basically we're going to have the same presentation and discussion that we had when Bob was here. And so I had suggested that they come up with some sort of, plan or goal or strategy, however that involves, whether it involves Bob or something else. Some of the things that he brought up, that he thinks that if Bob had some sort of assistant that could help him with some of the office related stuff, and he just concentrated on the pro formas and the meetings and that kind of thing like that, that might be a better thing. He also entertained the idea whether or not, there's space here in the building for there to be an office or a desk for Bob to have, so he's not operating out of his house. That somebody who, if he got some help from someone who's tech savvy. Part of his problem is that from talking with other stakeholders and people that have been involved with EDC, is that he's using an old dumb computer because he didn't realize, or for some reason he didn't realize that the better computer with all the updated information was the small computer, and he took the big one because it's got to be better, it's bigger. So the small one's sitting somewhere at CVTC, I guess, not being used. So that should get retrieved and should be used. Those were some of Gary's thoughts about, what could be done to potentially help Bob be more productive. But what are some of your thoughts about, first of all, whether it's worth meeting with the EDC board to forge some sort of path forward is it beneficial? Is it a waste of time? Do we want to see them come up with ideas as opposed to us suggest things? What are some thoughts? Does anybody have any thoughts?
I got thoughts, as always. I think we need to start from scratch. I don't think Bob's the man. I think there are new and young minds that show up all the time. And there might even be not so young minds that show up all the time. And I wish we had a period of time where we could at least look to see who's out there and what success they've had in doing something similar, or how they think that they can help us. Because first of all, we don't hardly have enough money to do much. But if you don't have enough money to do much and it doesn't produce anything, then that's kind of a waste of money. So I wish we had somebody else leading us in economic development.
I think that has been kind of a discussion, and talking with the former interim director who before was on board before Bob took over again. He thought that to get that maybe potentially younger or more skilled individual would be, it would require like a $140,000 salary for whoever that person would be. I always bring up Chippewa County because I've worked with their Economic Development Corporation with my own business for the last 7 years or so. And the county funds them at a substantial amount, but they produce results by, attracting all this business. And I don't know if this, a separate entity like Dunn County EDC has been for all these years is the best path forward. I don't know if absorbing something like that into the county and having the county spearhead economic development is the best way forward. I'll ask our county manager, do you have any thoughts? Bringing this up, is this all new to you or are you kind of aware of some of this that's been going on? I'm just kind of curious what kind of thoughts you might have.
So I am aware, both from, most recently sitting in your last month's meeting, but also from listening to Bob reports and the discussions last year about funding the EDC and kind of all of those pieces of it. So I think the first question that I have is, it's a little bit of a reality check on my part. So my presumption would be that economic development, at least in Dunn County, is a bit like maybe some other things that, and I think about like housing as we're doing a housing study now, that didn't necessarily have a really solid home. Maybe the EDC, but it seems to me like the EDC has been struggled for a number of years. And so does this committee have a solid picture of economic development kind of across the board in our community? Do we know do you know, I guess it's a question to you, do you know what other entities are, how is the EDC working with the Menominee group, working with Stout? I was talking to Seth Hudson, who worked for Cedar Corps, who's now going to work for Stout as he has a long title, but it includes as kind of their economic development liaison. So do we have a really good picture of what the current lay of the land is in Dunn County and in this community?
I think there's been some sort of there was a lot of synergy before, and that's one of the things that Gary and I actually talked about yesterday, was that there seemed to be a lot of synergy between Dunn County EDC, various stakeholders, the Stout Technology Park, and all of them. I mean, I think during that effort that brought in like the Walmart distribution center and all of that type of that industry and business, that a lot of that was during that era, and everybody seemed to be working, you know, and firing on all thrusters. I think part of the problem was that with the EDC is, unfortunately, when Eric got sick and basically was slowly dying in his position, that the smart thing to do would have been to, you know, replace him. But the moral thing to do was to let him basically serve his time there. Unfortunately, that meant that a lot of that communication, a lot of that synergy, it dissolved and fell apart because it was gone. I think that when Stacy was in the position, Stacy Wigfield as interim, that because he was a former CEO, he organized a whole lot of stuff. He got rid of a whole bunch of old paperwork that didn't need to be around. He organized things. He started to work a lot of that because he's been in the community long enough. He started to rebuild that synergy, and but he's retired and was only willing to basically do that a year. I think he went a little bit longer than that, if I recall. And then now all of that has started to fall apart again. So I told Gary yesterday, I go, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. We know that economic development is important. We're I don't know, as a committee, that we're convinced that this is the best, you know, vehicle for it. But what else? What do we do outside of that?
So one of the thoughts that, well, a few different thoughts that come to mind. One would be just in terms of the importance of economic development. So the Department of Revenue released its equalized value and net new construction numbers a week ago or so. And I think that they're very interesting. So in 2021, Dunn County's equalized value raised 12%. That's a significant increase. I think probably shared across much, if not all of the state, but it was a significant increase. But our net new development dropped. Net new construction number dropped. So we were at 1.65% in 2020, and we're at 1.35% now for the numbers for this year. So what that, and even more telling is when you look at it by community, the city of Menominee's net new construction was 1.12%, and the village of Elk Mound was 3.3%. So that sort of that premise that I've heard discussed here and in other spots about that to the east of us, some of that synergy that's going on there in Elk Mound and to the east, Eau Claire and Altoona, whatever that is, and however that all is working, it's reflected in our numbers. So I think that it certainly is illustrative of us. I see it as a priority. What I would say would be, and I don't know that this is an option, I know that you discussed it last month, was setting that money aside. I share Gary, Supervisor Steen's concern that if you dismantle the EDC at this point in time, it's really difficult to put it back together. You know, like so I don't know if that's the thing to do. What I would say is probably the whole system, I would argue, probably needs a really good health assessment of what are its strengths, what have we got going. I've heard Bob speak a number of times, and you know, I think he's a good talker. And I think he likes that part of
Yeah.
the role, and probably is good at it
Mhm.
in that sense of engaging people and talking and knows that line of the business. But it takes something beyond talking and actually making that something happen on the backside of that. And sometimes I've been concerned in listening to the talking that it's a lot of front side talking and maybe not that much actually happening on the backside of that, especially when we compare it to other communities around us. So I'd argue if it's possible to, so it's early August, practically that would give us 4 months to January 1st to essentially set the money in place and really focus in over the next, say, 6 weeks on trying to gather as much information we can about the health, or I can, whatever, about the health of the system, and maybe some recommendations moving forward so that it could be implemented in time for the 2023 budget. That'd be my suggestion.
Thoughts on that from anybody? Come on, Supervisor Quinn.
I have a lot of thoughts. No, I guess that's kind of how I see it too. That we do, I think, as we talked at the last meeting a little bit, that we really do need the Economic Development Corporation, but we need it to be reborn and re-envisioned kind of. And that's not going to happen. It's hard for it to see how it could happen on its own. It almost needs a partnership with the county to do that. And that requires the county to make some kind of commitment that if we go through this, then there's going to be money available to you. I don't know. And I think if we could do that, that would be, and then figure out the process. But the process might be, I mean, typically what you would do would be a strategic planning process, and you'd have someone come in and facilitate that. And that would be, you'd sort of like decide, it could be the county and the EDC doing it together, which would help build some bridges too between us all. But you know, and they've done that in the past. I know that for a while, I think at one time at least, they used Bruce Siebel, you know, Bruce, yeah, to be the facilitator of that. He knows the community. He would do a good job, I think. But there might be other ways to do that. But that kind of discussion, along with some information gathering and tough decisions, with a commitment from the county that if we go through this, there'll be support at the other side. One other question I have is the support that we're suggesting in the budget right now enough to make this worthwhile to them? I mean, are we just sort of dooming it to failure?
You mean at the amount that
Yeah.
we're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if it kind of depends on how much of, you know, if we were to actually have a full-time go-getter type of director, that we wouldn't be able to do it for the amount that is budgeted towards it. Now, obviously, you know, all that funding does not just come from Dunn County. The city
It
is
does
kicking-
now. That's the problem. It almost all comes
Yeah.
just from Dunn.
Well, I think the city kicks in 14 grand.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of the villages are like at 1,000 or 2,000, so it's not a huge amount. I don't know that any businesses are.
I think there are a few few banks, but not much. Really.
And I think that they are trying to also work a little bit more hand in hand with the greater Menominee Development Corporation, because that's now under different leadership, and it's not as much of an adversarial role with whoever was the individual that was in it before has actually moved out of the city. And so there's from what I understand,
That's promising, because that would be a big benefit would be if there could be real collaboration between.
Right, and then also if some funding were actually available for Dunn County EDC through. Then, because apparently they got really deep pockets and have a lot of money that they're just sitting on too, so. But so kind of getting back to your original point, is that something then that we almost have to come up with as a committee or as a county saying, okay, here are the parameters that we say we're gonna go forward with this at, this amount. I mean, because if we think that having it, one of the, like, when you talk about a facilitator, is that something that is available through like Momentum West as one of the things that they offer, as far
I
as
don't-
help?
I don't think so.
Okay,
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I don't know that they would either. I think strategic planning might be a bit premature.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I
think it's,
think it's really looking at, first, like I say, sort of a health assessment of what's out there, who's doing what. Asking some people who know a whole lot more certainly than I do about what can we do with $55,000? Maybe nothing, but maybe we can partner with something else that's happening, or maybe that's Bob halftime and something else, like, I think there's many potential options of things that, but I think it would first be really just doing some digging. I mean, I just think about when the county, when we were thinking about this was 2 years or 3 years before or home care was discontinued. But at that point in time, I spent a lot of time just talking to our partners in the industry to say, what if we closed, can you absorb this?
Mhm. I remember
And
that.
at that point in time, they said, no, we can't. And so I think that just talking to, there are people who have been involved in this for a long time, and I think could provide some good information, and I certainly would be willing to be a catalyst to getting that information together into some sort of digestible form, in a pretty expedient fashion, so that we could make some decisions for this budget cycle.
So, so you're saying that you could conceivably take on the job of coordinating that process.
Yeah.
And so and that sounds great. That's what it needs. It needs a champion
Mhm.
like that. And I think you're the right person. So how would this relate to Jim's question about getting together with the EDC to talk about? I mean, it seems like for that to happen, there has to be a discussion. So does that happen by us asking, sort of appointing you and maybe Jim to go talk to him? Or does it happen with by us sort of requesting a dialogue where we talk about how we want to go forward and then get buy-in from them? What do you see as how?
I would see the information gathering piece. I would see the EDC as obviously a critical piece of that, both in terms of their leadership as well as with Bob. I mean, Bob has been at this for a long time. He knows some things, that are worth tapping into and talking, assessing. And then I think, so assuming that could happen relatively quickly, then I think it would be, in terms of thinking about 2023, then sitting down and saying, all right, this is what we know. Now, what's our plan for the use of this funding for 2023?
and would that potential meeting be part of that fact finding, you think, maybe, or?
It could be, or at
because-
the end of it, I would say,
Okay.
so that the information gathered could kind of be shared with all of the.
So our message in that, tell me if I'm wrong, but so in that scenario or that strategy, our message to the EDC is, just wait, we're going to do some information gathering. We'll get back to you. Is that the right?
I think so. We don't want to disassemble the EDC,
Right.
but some things have to change and we don't know yet what those are. And we need to.
So we're gonna do some fact finding and then then we invite you to engage with us in a discussion.
Planning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I like that strategy. I think that makes a lot of sense because we're all aware that something needs to be done. We're all aware that economic development is important, that the EDC is probably still the best vehicle for that, but it's not functioning probably the best way. And it also could just be, Bob basically got pulled out of retirement and tossed in there, and he's having to, get back into doing something that he's had to restart the old muscles or something, basically like that. And it could be that with some proper focus and some help that could potentially be straightened out. But like we're saying, that we need to do the fact finding first. So
And I don't, I mean, I think Chris is right that Bob has a lot of experience and a set of skills, at least in a number of the areas that are important. But I don't think the future needs to be predicated on Bob. I mean,
No.
we need to think about what we need, and if
Well,
there's a way he can provide that, then that's fine. But
yeah,
If he was indeed retired, I would guess his commitment to wanting to be in that role over the long haul is probably not it either. I
Yeah.
think that my understanding or what I would suppose is that he came back out of retirement because he also did not want to see his work collapse.
yeah.
But it's not a long-term sustainable thing.
So, okay, Supervisor Vogel has a comment or question.
Yeah, so I would really appreciate figuring out how all of the organizations work together, because the whole Momentum West was new to me. But the Greater Menominee, they are working together on some projects, I think, in the Stout Technology Park. So that's good. And I'd like to see more of that. But we also have the West Central Regional Planning,
Yeah.
which I don't know how they figure into all of this.
We have a business development person at CVTC. We have an economic development focus at Stout. There's a lot of fragmented pieces.
Yeah, and there is a member on the Economic Development Corp that is from the Technology Park. So, and there is someone from CVTC.
Mhm.
So, but I don't know if what kind of parameters, or like, can they tell us what you get for $55,000? Like, is that so many meetings a month? Is it like how many pro formas? Because I think kind of like, how do we calculate a return on investment to the county? I struggle with that because I hear what they're doing, but I think since I've been on this committee, I think maybe one business came in that was reported on. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, we're not getting as good reporting to know what we're basically getting out of, and I think that's part of the thing that we think needs to change.
Yeah, and I think Bob would be willing to come, but maybe having a more structured report out or metrics might be helpful for everyone on our committee and for the county to know. But I think, there's some planning, like what is economic development? How does it work? What would be best for the county? And then setting some kind of guidelines and parameters, maybe.
Well, and I think about things like maybe $55,000. These are just thoughts because I have no idea whether I'm talking right out of my ear or not. But I think about like, do we have a good marketing strategy for Dunn County. And maybe it's $55,000 invested in putting together the materials that really showcase what we have to offer. Maybe that exists, but my guess is probably not in a very current format. And so, I mean, I think there are a lot of reasons why someone might want to come here, but I think that, you know, figuring out there are people who know how you do that and how you really make yourself attractive to places. There's places you go to do that.
Mhm.
There's venues, you know, to really get that information out. And so maybe I'm not saying that the $55,000 or more or less is necessary for that, but those are like places where I go, like, do we have those kinds of materials even available? Does Bob have those materials available to us? Or is basically what he's offering himself and his ability to develop a pro forma if someone reaches out to him?
So I'm wondering, do we need a motion to kind of spearhead this fact finding that you're kind of talking about here?
Yeah, we probably should.
Yes. So perhaps,
Well, I would, okay, let's see what that would look like. So the motion would, I guess, be that the committee is request Chris Corpola, the new county manager, to coordinate a what do you want? You want to call it fact finding, or you want to call it this information gathering?
Assessment?
An assessment of the current status of the partners involved in economic development in Dunn County, the resources that are available, and some of the options for structuring a broader effort going forward.
sounds good. I second it. Any more discussion on that motion? Huh? I did. Yes. Are you going to comment?
No.
Oh, you look like you were, you look like you were ready to push a button. Oh, oh, no discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed? Passes.
I have one question.
Yes.
And Chris can probably answer this, but I mean, so right now we have a recommendation from our committee to set aside $55,000 that could go towards whatever process develops. Hopefully it'll be a rebirth of EDC in some form. Is that sufficient? Again, I'll say, is that sufficient? That recommendation how do we get that recommendation in the budget? First of all, is it in the budget?
I don't know. I have
Okay.
to look.
And then is there, if in the fact, the information gathering period and the discussion, we come up with a option that we really support, but would take $100,000, is there a way to reconsider how that might fit into our budget as we go into the fall?
I believe so. So, when we meet on Saturday, we will be clear that this is a round one proposal.
Okay.
And then there are any number of variables between now and doing some deliberation in executive over September and early October to come up with a balanced proposal. So there is definitely time for recommended change.
Okay.
Sort of similar to the CIP and the purchase of the fans, you know, in the sort of the 11th hour. we think this is a project that warrants
Yeah.
consideration. and it was
Okay.
added.
Wonderful. Let's move on. We're going to talk about county communications and PR. And Chris, you're welcome to even listen in. And I had a meeting last month or earlier this month with Doug Mell, who owns Mell Communications, and we had a discussion kind of about, and this even leads into economic development, about how the county really doesn't have a means to communicate the things that we're doing, either good things that we're up to, or do a good job of explaining difficult decisions that the county has to make. Like, for example, the racetrack, when we had to come up with the COVID plan and what have you, or especially a lot of things that come up to your committee, PR&D, when it has to do with like zoning and things like that. We need some better communication. And Doug, obviously, from the background, as you can see, has has extensive experience here in Dunn County, and then also working with Leader Telegram, and is still doing a lot of communications and PR work. And he just, my impression from meeting with him is he gets it, and he's also fast. He doesn't think that this would actually take a lot of time on a monthly basis for what he wants to do as far as getting this information out. He thinks it would be and he doesn't want to work that much because he's kind of retired, but he doesn't not want to work. So he doesn't think that this would take more than 10 hours a month. So
Month, really?
yeah, 10 hours a month, because he's that fast.
Yeah.
And he and I talked about what he proposed would be like something like a monthly meeting with probably at least myself as part of this committee, as chair of this committee, and then with Chris as the county manager, to kind of identify, okay, what are key things that the county has done that would be good to communicate, or what are we doing that's important to address? And maybe some of those things could carry on from month to month, depending on what it would be. And then after that communication, and maybe communication with heads of committees that are dealing with things that would be important to get out there, then he would come up with a series of either press releases that could be then distributed, and then would also be out on the various county websites and social media accounts. In addition to if anybody was going to be made available for press within the county, he could then, coach them and give them some tips and on how to deal with things. He doesn't want to be like the Facebook warrior that goes out there and maybe challenges when there's bad or misinformation out there. I still think that having somebody do that at some point's important. However, if the county does a better job of communicating and cutting off, or at least tamping down misinformation and disinformation before it gets spread out there, or does a better job of communicating, here's how the county is working for you. Here's how the county's spending ARPA funds. Here is how, we didn't raise the levy because we did that. I mean, none of that's communicated out there. Nobody reads the minutes from meetings. Nobody, I'd be kind of curious to see who's watching, YouTube videos of the CRNT committee. How many views these meetings have, because it's not in an easily digestible, easy to read format. And so having somebody that can do that and distribute it in a way that it's like, oh, that's what they're up to, can go a long way for, I think, the county to counter some of that information that gets blown up because there's nobody spreading or telling the good story of Dunn County. Thoughts from anybody?
I'm not interested in being
Supervisor Vogel.
Is there any way to tie this also to economic development? So to promote Dunn County and what's great about
Yeah.
us and why you should come and have
Yeah,
your business here?
we can have any of that can be part of the topics that we basically have him, distribute. It means there could be quote unquote slow months where we don't have a lot of internal, deliberations or things that we really need to communicate. And at that point, we could sit down with Doug and say, hey, how about something generally about Dunn County as a good economic destination, that we have this land available, these opportunities, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And again, he's done this for a long time and he's fast. So he's good at what he does. He's sent me a whole number of different examples of some of the work that he's been doing recently. That actually just sent me one just before the meeting that I was going to send out, but I literally ran out the door before I got a chance to send it. But he's pretty active at this stuff and is good. So yeah, just to get back to your comment, and that I could see, depending on how much we have him doing, mentioning something about economic development or tourism on a monthly or every other month basis, depending on what it is that we have to be addressing or are trying to address at that point.
May I offer one other comment about
Yeah.
that? So I think another area that this directly feeds into is recruitment and retention.
Oh, yeah.
So if we have a mechanism to really both to illustrate the good work that's happening, but also there's a lot of data which would say that people that are exploring the potential of coming to work for a particular entity will first do see what social media has to say about them and working for them. And so I think we could directly impact that. And I would say, I see Doug mentions here working with the Dunn County Community Recovery Team, but we worked closely together in that. And that group really looking at sort of mid and post-COVID related issues, that team really chose to just sort of take the high road and try to keep a message that was really like positive, informative, not heavy-handed, and he was a phenomenal partner in putting those together for us. So
Good. So you have some firsthand experience with
I
him.
do.
Yeah.
He's a great writer.
Any other comments?
No, I think I'm thrilled that he's available. I mean, it's just the right person at the right time, and maybe the right price too, given the efficiency of the messenger.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be a huge investment for the county if, like I said, he really doesn't want to, with his other commitments, spend more than 10 hours a month. And basically the way he's described it, that could be done.
So that'd be about 12,000 a year.
Yeah. And that would be
a really good investment to me.
right. And it would be that would be like up to 12,000 a
Yeah.
year. Because you know how county government is. There are some months when there's not a lot happening.
Well,
So,
and once we get the system in place, there are staff who are capable of writing good articles about
mhm.
personal interest things and whatever. Your whole staff could just be good at that. I mean, today at the PRD hearing, it became clear to the committee that, or to the staff, I think too, that we have not done a very good job of getting the story out about all the stuff Dunn County has done in clean water.
Oh,
And
sure.
people up from the lake do not think we were doing anything.
Sure. Right.
And I don't blame them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Because how would they know?
how would they know? Right.
Yeah. So I guess I would entertain a motion to make an offer to bring Doug Mel on in this capacity for up to 10 hours a month. As it kind of to see how it goes and maybe fund that for I don't know if we have to set a time like up to a year or a 6-month plan so that it has or do we want to keep it open-ended?
I mean, $12,000 to get Doug Mill to do a year's worth of communication, to me is a really good
Yeah.
idea. I mean, it's good, it may take a while to get the system set up and get us used to it, so I would say we just ask for a $12,000 allocation in the budget. Does that seem crazy to you, Chris? No.
I don't think so. I think that's.
And then we
seems
try
like
it for a year
a
and
good
work on it,
plan.
you know?
Yeah.
There's travel time.
A little bit of travel. If he comes to a meeting or whatever.
Yeah, if he has to come to a meeting with with Zoom options and things like that,
Shouldn't be too much of that.
it shouldn't be necessarily a huge amount of that, so. Yes,
I just wanted to say that one thing that is really appealing to me about this proposal is that it is a fee for service model and it isn't just $12,000 and you communicate, like we were just talking about a different, salaried employee that isn't necessarily delivering the way we hope. And this is very concrete that way. And so I think this is great.
excellent. So I guess I would make a motion that we contract with Mel Communications for $12,000 for a year's worth of service at 10 hours a month.
I wonder if, given the timeliness of the budget process, the motion would be to request a budget allocation to allow us to.
Okay, that's a good idea.
contract with us.
How would we phrase that?
Oh, so the
Yeah.
motion would be that we request that the committee intends to request a budget allocation of up to $12,000 to hire Doug Mel Communications to provide communication services to Dunn County, or whatever you said after what I said.
I'm glad Michelle's taking notes.
Yeah, she got it. She's got it.
Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you. Would we need to perhaps have him fill out the outside agency budget request then? Would that go through that same process? Would this be considered an outside agency?
No, because he's not we're basically contracting with him for our services. It's not that he's an outside agency that we're just funding.
Okay. So I'm guessing we have to give a dollar amount of 12,000.
Yes, which is, I think, what we did.
Yeah.
So, Tom and I sort of made a motion together.
Jim can make it and I'll second it.
Okay,
That's okay.
there we go.
The one consideration that I would have would be, and I think that I could offer a solution as well. The one consideration that I would have would be the county's purchasing ordinance, which would, so it doesn't get to the level of requiring, it's not over $15,000, so it doesn't require formal bidding process, obtaining bids. But I also would argue one of the outs that can be utilized, or one of the exceptions that can be utilized to having to obtain bids for a project like this would be that you have someone who has a unique ability to meet a specific need. And I would just argue, given his experiences with the university and the community, he would stand in a position of having sort of a unique ability to meet the need that's been identified.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I can't even think of anybody else that comes close that I know that are operating in the PR space. out there. So, we've had a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? If not, then, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
I,
Any opposed? None? Passes. Okay. I was really hoping that Jason would be here for this next part, because I thought he would be a good person to talk about this. Because I don't know enough about it, and I was kind of going to rely on his knowledge base about it. Is Michelle, do you recall if there's any sort of deadline? August 15th. So, yeah, so it's coming up.
It's a pretty simple application, but it does have to be in August. Right now, often they extend these deadlines. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but it has to be in by the August 15th. So we'd have to know what we were going to do, or where we were going to do it, what we wanted to do, and more importantly, we'd have to have some kind of demonstrate some kind of commitment from the places we wanted to do it, that they wanted it.
Right.
And those are not impossible, but practically impossible.
Practically impossible at this point.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was a good program, and I did want to bring it up, but, kind of based on the short turnaround and, the criteria, with the population base as being as small as it is, that, I don't think we can do anything about it at this
Yeah, I
point.
mean, I thought, well, maybe we could identify the villages in Dunn County, and that would probably be right around that 7,500.
Yeah,
But then we have to go out and get buy-in from letters of support. So maybe if they do
it's
extend the
granted, yeah.
deadline,
Yeah.
we could think about that.
okay. I guess that would be my thought, is that kind of watching the program to see if the deadline gets extended, then maybe it's something that our committee can address, because it seems like be a good program to involve some of the rural communities in Dunn County. So, so we'll move on. Just next meeting date, it will be September 13th. Are there any announcements from anybody? Anything that anybody wants to share? Larry, anything you want to share?
I was very happy to get an inch of rain.
Oh, yeah.
You got an inch?
I didn't get an inch. I mean, my lawn, I haven't had to
It's-
mow it in a week or a
It
month and
was
a half.
spotty, yeah.
It's the same thing, you know. So
Well-
that's why it's been, I mean,
Mhm.
it is south of us, they were talking flooding.
It's heartbreaking. I really appreciate your comments about getting manure on the fields and how that helped you. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's so,
Ann can't hear you.
the organic matter that comes with, corn
the bedding
stalks,
and the,
manure, straw, and it's tedious, hard work every spring. You're doing it when you ought to be getting your crops in the ground. But you're saying, if I get this done and things really get bad, that's my ace in the hole. And just very, very fortunate. And I mean, I've got land and corn that will produce no corn, to some that will probably go over 120 to 150 bushel per acre. And the added organic matter is the main difference. So.
and when we were having it, I didn't want to bring it up today, but we're having a discussion about gardening. I was saying, what are the obstacles to expanding the practice of a household garden in our community? And one of them might be access to high quality compost or organic matter. And that's something we could figure out a solution to,
Yeah.
you know.
And I mean, the large CAFOs are are finding success in their digesters. And you just have to go right to Dunn Chippewa County line and see where Jensen's have
Yeah,
the compost there, and it's well, I mean, you might not want to, but I'd lay down and take a nap in it. Don't feel bad at all.
And on that note, our meeting is adjourned.
right.